As we get started here, we really encourage all of you to introduce yourselves in the chat, and some questions for you, kind of some how are you questions and warm-up questions. How are you, your colleagues, and your the adult learners at your program doing? What are you looking forward to? Also, have you and your staff at your program been able to get the COVID vaccine? So please feel free to share in the chat, and we're going to get started here soon. Jason, I definitely hear what you're saying about people feeling exhausted or tired a little bit, but optimistic. That's great that we still have that optimism. Excellent. Well, please continue to share in the chat as we get started. Some tech issues. If you have any technical help issues, please chat with Carla Vian from Literacy Action Network, and Carla will be able to help you. As you look at your name in the participant list, please make sure that you've identified yourself by first and last name. And at the bottom of the screen, you'll see your toolbar that will have multiple options for you in terms of being able to unmute, start your video. For now, we hope that you'll keep your mic and video off. It'll look like that as you see on the screen. However, as we get to some of our breakout groups, we'll encourage you to turn on your video and unmute yourself. Also, during our question and answer time or some discussion time, we'll encourage you to invite you to unmute and share. Also, if you're looking for closed captions, that is available in the toolbar. You can probably under the three dots and more menu. Okay, well, let's get started. Just a helpful note, we will be recording today's session, and the recording along with the slides will be posted on the Literacy Action Network website. And this is web chat. It's a special web chat here on Wednesday, March 10th, and we'll get into that in just a minute. On the agenda today, we'll do welcome introductions, which we've started now. We have some updates from the Minnesota Department of Education, and we'll continue the manager meetup conversation on program planning and budgeting. So hopefully there'll be a lot of updates or news that you can share with each other or continue to connect with your peers on. And then we'll make sure we have time for questions and talk about next steps. My name is Brad Haskamp, and I am the State Adult Education Director at the Minnesota Department of Education. And I'm glad to see all of you here today.
Afternoon, everybody. I'm Jody Versailles. I am the Program Quality Specialist on our Adult Ed team. Good to see you all.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Julie Danko. I am the Transition Specialist at the Minnesota Department of Education.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Esther Leiden. I'm the Professional Development Specialist on our team, and great to have you all here.
Excellent, thank you. And on our team as well, we have Alice Smith, who is our GED Records and Administrative Support Specialist. Today is special because not only is it a web chat, but we're working with Literacy Action Network to make this a manager meetup to continue the conversation on program planning and budgeting. So Carla, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Carla Vian with Literacy Action Network. And as Brad said at the beginning of the webinar, just chat to me if you're having any technical issues, and hopefully I can help you out. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ann Trokel, and I am the Literacy Action Network Chair of the Professional Engagement Committee and the manager of Glacial Lakes AV Consortium.
Excellent. Thank you, Carla. Thank you, Ann. We're really excited to be working with Literacy Action Network on today's session. We do have some staffing updates from the Minnesota Department of Education. One thing that some of you will likely not know, but Todd Wagner, our former state adult education director, And then he came back to help with our team. He has now fully retired, and he is enjoying the month of March on the North Shore. He and his wife had an opportunity to vacation on the North Shore at a cabin, and he was ready to dive fully into retirement. So we're so glad to have him be able to do that. And we hope he's having a wonderful time on the North Shore, and we're not at all jealous. In addition, leaving MDE, we have our commissioner, Mary Catherine Ricker, is stepping down as of April 1st. Her last day, technically, though, is March 19th, so next week. And that means we'll have a new education commissioner, and the new education commissioner will be Heather Mueller, who has been our deputy commissioner. And Heather Mueller, before coming to the Department of Education, she was with the Mankato Area Public School District. One additional piece of news with staffing, we have a new position posted, a communications and administrative support specialist for adult education. This posting went up this week and will be live or open through March 29th. In the chat, you'll see a link to the position posting for more information. And this person will be providing communications for our team, technical assistance, team logistics coordination, such as helping to provide technical assistance during webinars and just coordinating all of our team's information, as well as adult education diploma assistance. That's both standard adult diploma and assistance with GED related or high school equivalency diplomas, and other support services. A pretty big role for this new person. And in the past, in a similar role was Sherry Eichinger, but we have rewritten the role to a degree to kind of increase the responsibilities on this new person. So if you know of people that are interested, please check out that posting, and we encourage you to share that posting. We hope that this new person will be able to join us sometime in the next couple months, and we look forward to that. Let's dive into some of our other updates this morning. Oh, it's afternoon, never mind. One update for you this afternoon is the student technology funding update. Last week, we sent an email to each of you that are consortium managers announcing the funding from Literacy Action Network and Literacy Minnesota for student technology access. And you can use this funding to purchase technology for students and or help students access and use technology for learning. If your consortium accepts this funding, which we hope you will, that funding would need to be used by June 30th, 2021. And as of 1 o'clock today, just at the start of this webinar, all fiscal agents should have completed the form due today at 1 o'clock. So if you're one of the, I think, 4 or 5 consortium managers that have not yet completed the short online form, which should take you, we think maybe 2, maybe 3 minutes to fill out, please do that as soon as possible. And if you're wondering where the link to that form is, we encourage you to check your email. I sent it originally on Thursday last week, but I also sent a reminder to those that hadn't filled out the form this morning. So hopefully you can check your email from my email this morning and complete that short form, whether or not you want to utilize or accept the funding. And we are getting some questions about how programs can use the student technology funding, and we'll address those as we are able to. But we do hope that you use it and think about how you can use it to purchase technology for students or purchase staffing or other resources to help students access and use their technology for learning. Astrid, would you like sharing a little bit about digital navigation support?
Yeah, so on a related note, as you're thinking about how you might use that additional funding or your existing funding to support learners in accessing and using technology to connect with your services, we wanted to let you know that our colleagues at Literacy Minnesota have hired a temporary digital navigation specialist. Her name is Charlotte Jaden, and she'll be working at least through the end of June with Literacy Minnesota to collect and disseminate digital navigation resources for the field of Minnesota adult education. She'll also be working on developing digital navigator training for staff and volunteers and making recommendations about how we can continue to support digital navigation in the future in Minnesota adult education. So if you need some assistance or some ideas as you are setting up or expanding digital navigation services within your program, you've got Charlotte's contact information here. As well, if you were not able to attend the digital navigation session at the Unregional last Friday, there's a link here to the recording of that session where you can hear from some folks that have been doing digital navigation and hear directly about what has worked well and lessons learned from them. So I encourage you to check that out if you were not able to attend.
Thanks, Astrid. Another update that we wanted to share is related to current bills in the state legislature. There are a couple of proposals that affect adult education. One is a one-time $10 million additional allocation for adult education consortia. And this would be a separate allocation, not built into the formula, but a separate allocation that each consortia would receive based on the percentage that their state funding that consortium receives. That percentage of total state funding. Any funding that we distribute, if this funding is approved, would need to be used by the consortium by June 30th, 2022. Another proposal that's in the legislature is regarding high school equivalency tests and the subsidy. For this year, you'll know that the subsidy is to pay for the first test, to make the first test free for each tester that uses the code. Going forward, starting July 1, the legislature and the governor are proposing to go back to a $10 per test subsidy or $40 max subsidy per tester, and decreasing the amount of the subsidy from $245,000 to $125,000. And that would be available from July 1, 21 to June 30th, 22. Those bills, though, have not passed the legislature yet and are still going through the committees and the legislature, both the House and the Senate. As we get more information, we will be sure to share more information, or maybe even Literacy Action Network will be sharing more information with you on those proposals as we go forward. So thinking about that GED subsidy, the MN GED 30 code is still usable, and you can use it for tests scheduled through anytime now through June 30th. But starting July in 2021, we'll have a new code that we will likely need to use if there is only a partial subsidy instead of a full subsidy of the test. So stay tuned for that. I see we have a question on the legislation regarding the subsidy and the additional $10 million. Any prediction on how likely the bills are to pass? Great question, Teresa. I have heard general support for it, but there's also been a lot of discussion about, well, what if we give you 5 million instead of the 10 million, or how much you exactly need? And so there's been a lot of discussion around that. And so I'd like to maybe turn it over to Tom Citron-Heisem if he is here. Tom, would you like to unmute yourself and share the answer to your prediction on how likely the bills are to pass?
Sure. Can you hear me? Hopefully.
Yes. Yep.
You know, I don't really know a whole lot more than what you've already shared, Brad. My personal opinion is it's somewhat unlikely that we would get a full $10 million. But you never know. I mean, they're cutting all kinds of deals. There is some talk of passing a tax bill that has to do with not taxing certain unemployment insurance benefits and small business loans and so on. And there's been talk of attaching to that the summer school funding, which in the governor's budget is where we are. So that's always a possibility. It's kind of an odd thing, however, to have education funding come through the tax committee instead of the education committee. So I don't know really what's going to happen with that. It's all very murky right now. If I had to predict, though, I would say I think it's kind of unlikely that we would get a full 10 million, but it's possible.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate that perspective from Literacy Action Network. One other thing I'd like to share is the latest update on the high school equivalency assessments competition, or the Adventure on the High Seas. Reviewers are finishing up their scoring. Many of the reviewers have submitted their scoring evaluations, but we still have a couple more reviewers that are finishing up their evaluations. We hope to be able to announce the results soon. And what we know is that any test or tests that are approved will be implemented starting July 1, 2021. And as we look ahead and we announce which test or tests are approved, we will be forming a new high school equivalency testing advisory group that will help us kind of keep track of technical assistance, professional development recommendations, policy recommendations, and other issues regarding high school equivalency testing once the results are announced. So stay tuned on this effort. Okay, then I'm going to turn it over to Jody to talk about grants and applications. Jody.
All right, thanks, Brad. So some reminders for everyone about our the relevant grants and applications for ABE funding. So as usual, as you are used to every year, we're coming up on annual application time. So the annual application for your regular state and federal adult education funds is due on June 1st, as usual. Just a reminder that just like you did last year, you will need to include table A1 hours, which we are going to use again in the formula for the upcoming fiscal year. So that's March 14th, 2019 to March 13th, 2020. And also remember, in addition to those sort of historical hours at this point, you will also need to submit table A, a regular table A, which will list your hours or will report your hours from the time period that we are currently in. But remember, keep in mind, we will not use those hours in the funding formula. However, you do, of course, still need to be tracking them, and you will need to report those hours on table A in your application. So this spring, we will be bringing you some more details and some more information about that annual application as the time comes closer. Normally, we do that at the regional events in the spring. We won't do that this year, obviously, because we aren't doing regional events in person. So we're going to have two ways that you can get more training and information about the annual application. The first one is I'm planning to do a series of quick video overviews and instructions similar to the ones that I made last year. And we will put those up on our mnabe.org website in April. Then, so that's one way you'll be able to get some more information and training on that application. And then the other option will be on our next web chat, which is scheduled for May. We will spend a good portion of the time at that event talking through the annual application and giving you all the information you need to fill that out. So stay tuned and be watching for more information on the annual application. There is just one other reminder about a particular table that we wanted to bring up at this point. So remember that table 7 is one of the tables you have typically had to include in that annual application. Table 7 lists your staff and volunteer data. And we just want to remind you that our expectation is, as of July 1, 2020, so currently, you all should be recording all of your staff and all of your volunteers in SID. And that will make it fairly straightforward for you to be able to pull that table 7 data from SID in order to fill out the table 7 on the annual application. So this slide just outlines exactly which fields are required. Note, you are not necessarily required to track volunteer hours in SID, although many programs do that and find that useful. But that is a question that we often get here. So just a reminder about that, about Table 7. And then I was gonna just remind you about 5-year narratives. I know if you are in one of the consortia listed on this slide, you don't need any reminding. This is the group of consortia who are currently working on their narrative to be submitted on June 1st of this year, 2021. And then this next group, the consortia listed on this slide are the folks who are sort of next in line to submit a narrative. So what that means, if you work for a consortium listed on this slide, what that means is the very first step in the process for you all is to review the narratives that are submitted this year in June. So if you work for one of these consortia, be watching for an email from me, hopefully yet this week, where I will give you some more information about that narrative review. But the short version is you'll need to identify some folks from your consortium who can look over and read through the narratives submitted in June. You have basically the month of June to do that kind of on your own. And then on June 24th, we'll be convening some sessions virtually. We won't meet in person this year, but we'll do that. We will do it synchronously on a webinar where we can get together and talk through that review and finalize scores and feedback. So be watching, if you're in this group of consortia, be watching for more information from me on that. However, note that this group does not have to submit a narrative in 2022. Thank you, Brad. Because we will have in 2022, we will have kind of a different year where all ABE consortia will need to submit an application for federal ABE funds. So that group on the previous slide, you're really looking at submitting that narrative in 2023. For 2022, we will all need to work on the federal application, and we will be getting more information out to you all to support you in completing that application, and we will start working on communicating more about that this summer and this fall. And then just one final reminder that I have, or just a clarification. Some of you have participated in the past in program improvement cohorts, and in the past we have run program improvement as sort of a technical assistance process, and we've based it on level gain rates and post-testing rates. But we know that this current program year that we are in is not a normal year. We know that hours and outcomes do not look the same. We know that the pandemic has completely changed what we do and how we do it. So I just want you to know for sure that there will not be a program improvement process in the upcoming program year of 21-22. So no need to lose any sleep about that. Hopefully you weren't anyway. And then I think I'm going to pass it off to Astrid. Before I do that, I see your question, Kelly. Yes, I do believe there will be a report card for 2021, just like there was a report card for 19-20, but we just didn't run a program improvement process associated with those results. So yes, we will plan to have a report card.
Okay, thanks, Jody. I also wanted to remind everyone, a couple of emails have gone out about this, but the request for proposals for our next round of supplemental service grants are now available on our MDE website. They are due on April 2nd. And so these are the grants that fund our Minnesota Adult Education Support Network to provide services around professional development and assessment and disabilities and transitions. What am I forgetting? Distance learning, technology, volunteer and outreach services, all of those wonderful services that are available to all consortia across the state. And we're really excited that we now have a new grant opportunity, a new supplemental service grant that will be focused on racial equity in adult education. So this grant activities will include things like conducting a racial equity analysis of our state adult ed system, making some recommendations to support racial equity efforts, both at the state and program level, and convening advisory groups to support all of those grant activities. And each one of those grant opportunities will fund one statewide provider to serve our entire field. So you can find more information on the website link there. And if you have any questions, you can contact me directly. Go to the next slide. Also, just wanted to make sure that everybody had on their radar that we have had a number of important Minnesota distance learning updates this past week. Last Friday at the Spring Unregional, many new distance learning processes and resources were unveiled. So hopefully many of you or most of you were able to be part of that event and had a chance to hear about the new distance learning website, a couple of new online courses designed to support distance education, including a new required distance learning course that is required of anyone who's engaging in distance learning activities at your program that has not already completed the old DL Basics or DL 101. You can find the link to those courses there. And the distance learning team also has reopened the distance learning platform and teacher created course approval processes. And we've launched a new model for distance education proxy hours, which is called the teacher verification model, to be used with asynchronous teacher created lessons. So lots of important information. If you weren't able to be there, there is a link to the Minnesota ABE PD YouTube channel. And if one of my colleagues can put that in the chat for people to access, you can see a recording of all the sessions, including the various distance learning sessions that were offered at that event. And any questions about any and all of those topics can go to our distance learning team at the email on the slide. Thanks, Brad. And then finally, just wanted to remind everybody that we do have an adult education specific PELSB approved training focused on the cultural competency relicensure area. So Atlas is going to be offering a two-part, both days required, cultural competency training led by Dr. Rose Chu and a co-facilitator, Andrea Eckelberger. That will be on April 16th and April 30th, half days. And registration is open now, so you can head over to the Atlas PD calendar to get registered or send your teachers there so that they can get those required CEUs and experience a great training. We're really excited about it and the opportunity to really tweak some of the content so that it fits our adult education context. We'll turn it over to Julie.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is a reminder that many workforce development boards are currently working on their infrastructure funding agreements. And for those of you who are not familiar with workforce development boards, there are 16 of them. There are actually 16 workforce development areas that cover the state of Minnesota. Each area has a board, and each board has an adult basic education representative that is a member of that board. And as a member of that board, we're also part of what's called the one-stop system. And in Minnesota, that's been labeled the Career Force system. And as such, we're a core partner who is expected to make contributions to support that one-stop infrastructure. They have extended the finalization of these until June 30th of 2021. DEED put a pause on the negotiations because they need further clarification from the Federal Department of Labor. And just so everyone knows, I have been reaching out to several of you to try to get the amount that you have been contributing to your local one-stop system, because we are required to report that to our federal office, Octave. Next slide, please. I want to remind those that might be in corrections setting that there is an integrated education and training in corrections virtual learning series. It looks like Astrid has put the link in the chat. If you would like to sign up for those, there is one tomorrow that is specifically focusing on IET programs in jails. And then there will be one on IET programs in prisons. And then they will allow people to apply for a pilot in corrections. And that will be a webinar held on March 30th. So if you have a site in jails, or if you work at the Department of Corrections, please consider watching these and being involved in the IET pilot. And then this is just a reminder that the Pathways to Prosperity grants, if they are funded, and as far as we can tell, there is no reason as to why they wouldn't be, but it's not a definite. They're more than likely, the request for proposals will go out sometime this summer. So it would be a good time now to be looking at some potential training partners, whether that's post-secondary employers or other training partners in your community. But please also check on your deed labor analysis, see what industries are in demand in your area, and see what employers might be interested in partnering as well. And I believe that is it for the transitions updates.
Thank you so much, Julie. And thanks to the whole Department of Ed adult education team. Now we're excited to open it up and collaborate with Literacy Action Network to continue our manager meetup conversation. Conversations on program planning and budgeting for the upcoming year, which we know are a big challenge. To kind of kickstart this month's conversation, I'm going to turn it over to Ann Trokel, who is our Professional Engagement Committee Chair at Literacy Action Network and the Consortium Manager for the Glacial Lakes Consortium. Ann.
So we're going to take a minute and review some of the main points that were discussed at our February manager meetup. We went through the note document that was used during our breakout sessions, and we posed the question that day, what decisions have you made regarding next year, and what other ideas are you considering? At that time, we also heard from a few managers and what their ideas were regarding how they were going to transition programming. Some of the points that were brought up were most were considering keeping a component of online and distance learning into the future, as they've heard many students prefer it. It does remove some of the barriers for our students that arise when we have in-person classes. At that time, many managers and participants were reporting that they would continue to use software and applications like WhatsApp and Zoom, Google Meet, and so forth. Some regional and large consortium-wide online classes were being considered, and many programs were working on what would be called a hybrid approach to programming. At that time, we also discussed concerns and questions around fall programming, and we heard and recorded that participants were talking about and discussing that the access to technology continues to be an issue for our students and our programs. There is some concern about the contact hour funding and when we start counting our contact hours again for that. We know that our beginning EL students struggle with technology, and then we're all kind of struggling with how to fund both in-person and our distance education or online programming that we have. And so those are the highlights from our last manager meetup, and we'll continue to kind of build on those things this afternoon.
Thanks, Ann. That is, like Teresa said, that's a great summary of the last meetup, and Astrid has shared the notes from the last session if you want to see more of the details across the groups. There are a couple of additional things that I want to share that might affect your program planning process and budgeting process. This one should not be news to anybody in the audience, but remember that for 2021-22 funding, we will be reusing those 2019-2020 hours that you reported on table A1. And so those will be the same hours that we use for your funding for the next year. And so what that means is if there's equal state AB funding from last year to this year, every consortium will get an equal amount of state ABE funding this next year. Now, looking beyond this next year, the big question is what about 2022-23? And what about contact hours starting May 1st, 2021? And so the Minnesota Department of Education is working with Literacy Action Network, and we will be creating an application process and announcing the new contact hour reporting work group, which will form in the month of April, and their first meeting will be in the month of April. And that group will be deciding or creating recommendations, I should say, for what hours should be used for funding in 2022 and 2023. Those recommendations, though, might be more complicated. The process might be more complicated than the current contact hour reporting working group that we had for this past year. These recommendations might affect how we apply MDE policy, or maybe changes to Department of Ed policy. It might require some advocacy from Literacy Action Network, and quite possibly there could be potential legislative change proposals that come out of this group, or recommendations from this group on changes to statute. So this group will have a bigger lift, maybe even, than the current contact hour reporting group. And so we don't know at this time, will contact hours as of May 1st count towards adult education funding? We don't know, but this new group that we will form will help us answer those questions. So stay tuned. Then I'm going to turn it over back to you, Anne, correct?
Yes, yes. Before we go into breakout groups, we are going to have an update from Karen Walters. She gave us an update in February at our manager meetup, and we're going to come back to her. And so Karen, if you're ready, you could unmute yourself, and we'd be happy to hear kind of what's going on down in Mankato.
Hey everyone. So I don't have anything earth-shattering to report, just some things that I've been working through this last month with our ABE leadership team. And what we've been doing is gathering data on what times of day we've been having best attendance between the online and the face-to-face models. We're thinking back to when we were face-to-face prior to COVID, what trends were we seeing? And then now that we're in COVID and been doing online this whole school year, what trends are we seeing? And some of the things that have become apparent to us over this last month are that our daytime programming was very strong in the morning face-to-face at our main site at Lincoln Community Center in Mankato. We believe some of that, the reason for that was because bus systems run during the day. We have childcare on site. We have a lot of community partner involvement coming to the center, providing support services. And the bulk of the people would come in the morning. And we would start to see attendance drop off in the afternoon because people would start heading home, getting ready for a second shift. Children would be coming home from school. And evening was slim. We tried to build our evening program for some time and just never could really get that accomplished. But since we've been in COVID, we've noticed our evening programming has ramped up. We've had people attend our evening online from a little further away because they didn't have to worry about transportation or driving. All of our evening students want to continue online. 100% of them said they do. And so we're thinking about maybe expanding evening a little bit and having that stay online, especially in the deep of winter when people don't want to be traveling. We're also considering what should we do with our afternoon programming. It's very possible that we would have something like morning face-to-face, evening online, and afternoon be a combination. Those who need childcare and a quiet place to study could stay on site, but maybe there would be a combination of online and in person in our afternoons to ramp up the attendance, because right now the attendance is low in the afternoon during face-to-face times, but it's pretty strong during our COVID. So we're looking at data from both before COVID and during COVID to make some decisions. We haven't made any final decisions. We know that childcare is critical to face-to-face learning for us and transportation. We also have been doing some regional classes, which have been very exciting. The regional classes have been a Southwest regional group through our regional transitions funds. We've been running a couple parapro sessions this last summer and last spring. We're going to run a parapro coming up in the next month and English for driving. We're currently running a child development cross consortia with the ability for people to enroll from multiple ABE programs. And we're pretty excited about that. We're taking that up one more level with what we're calling a community interpreter training that will result in a certification between 2 different workforce service areas with our Pathways to Prosperity funds that will start in April. And one thing we know for sure is that coordination of that is essential to that working. I was talking to Brad the other day about when we're doing our regional work, right now, the issues we're running into are not necessarily about how to divide up the contact hours. That has not been a big concern for us, partially because of the contact hour change right now, but also just because we are all very much working together and wanting this to work. But some of the challenges that we're facing with regional programming is more about platforms and how do we get students to be combining into each other's distance learning platforms when our domains of our schools don't work together. So, trying to use our Google Classroom, Google Meets with somebody outside of our organization in Mankato has been a challenge. Trying to see how can we use a student platform that will serve cross consortia. So we're working through some of that. We have hired a distance learning coordinator in Mankato, and we have also tacked on a little bit of transitions funding to that so that she can serve the entire region for these regional courses. And if we didn't have that person to coordinate the efforts, I think all of us managers would just be like, I told Brad, we probably would have given up on that in about the first half hour we tried to do it, because none of us has the time to coordinate those details. So I know we'll be looking forward to more regional classes. I know we'll be continuing a distance learning coordinator. And in Mankato, I think it's just a matter of continuing to look at the data about pre-COVID and during COVID, what has worked well and keeping the best pieces.
Thanks, Karen. It's always good to hear an update and kind of hear what you are considering as we come together to try and imagine what the next steps are going to be for our ABE programs. So as we prepare to be split into breakout groups, I'll just give you a little bit of instructions. Once you're in there, make sure you introduce yourself to each other, assign a note taker. I'm not sure who was going to drop the link to the note-taking doc. I don't know if Astrid has that into the chat. And in that note-taking doc, you will see the questions we'd like you to discuss this time. And those questions are, how are you planning to balance online and face-to-face offerings in the future? And what models are you considering? And what new information or lessons have helped you over the last month since the last time we met in planning for next year's programming and budgeting? So I think the breakout sessions are going to be around 20 to 25 minutes. I think there'll also be a countdown, so you'll know when to wrap up your conversation, and then we can come back together and perhaps hear from a few people to report out what was discussed in your groups.
Carla, are we ready to move into breakouts?
Yes, I'll move everybody into a breakout now. So
Okay.
it looks like we're planning on about 18 minutes and then a 2-minute countdown. Is that correct?
Yes, that will work.
Okay.
And I'm going to pause the recording at this point.
Okay, Tom, are you in the main session now? Yep, there we go. Okay, I'm going to.
Oh, I'm sorry, I hit later. I didn't mean to hit later.
Oh,
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Okay, so now I think, can you go back to your room or do I need to move you back to your room?
Let me see. I don't know how to get back to my room on my own, I guess. I'm sorry.
Oh, what room are you in?
Hey,
I think the only way I can enable your video, but now I need to try to put you back in your room.
jeez.
Something there that tells you to go back to your, is it? Oh, here. Oh, no, put in waiting room. No. Ugh, now I don't know how to put you back in your room. It's not showing you as unassigned. Let me go back. What room are you in?
8, number 8.
8. Okay. Move to, okay. Look under the more, the little 3 dots that says more. Does it show does it say something about join room?
Just a minute. No, it says meeting settings. That's the only one that's sort of close, but I don't think that's probably it.
3 dots to join.
Yeah, no, I have that dots, but it's not. I'm on my iPad, and usually I'm on my main computer, but for a large number of complicated reasons, which you're not interested in, I'm on my iPad.
Oh, let's see. Let me see if I can allow to multi-pin, put in waiting room. I don't see a control that allows me to put you back into your room.
Oh, shoot.
Oh, no. And you're not in my unassigned.
Huh.
You know, if you left and came back into the meeting, I bet you would be in unassigned.
All right, so let me try that. So I need to leave the meeting. Just
And
a
then
minute.
come back into the meeting and then I can.
Okay. All right, hang on a second. Leave me.
Okay, I'm going to put you in room 8 now. You should
Thank
go.
you.
back, everybody. We'll just invite you all to turn off your video now that we're back in the large group to maintain our bandwidth. And at this point, we have a few minutes. We would like to open up the discussion to the larger group now and ask you to share. What did you hear in your small group? What are some of the models that people are planning to use going into the future, thinking about how you're going to balance online and face-to-face instruction, either something you're planning or something you heard from a colleague? And what new information or lessons have helped you over the last month as you've been planning? And I see we'll start with a question. Brian said our group had a question about funding and wondering if we could have Brad clarify. Brian, why don't you go ahead and unmute and share your question?
So during, we had an understanding that we were going to basically receive the same funding as last year. And then Brad just mentioned that the funding, whatever is allocated from out, would be distributed equally. So I was just wondering, what does that really mean?
Great question, Brian. So when I was talking about divvying out the additional funding according to percentage of state funding, that was if we next year get that additional 10 million or an additional allocation. That would be supplemental or additional to your state funding and the formula funding that you receive. So the formula funding, assuming that that the amounts are equal, last year's total state funding and this year's total state funding for the formula, assuming that is equal, your consortium would receive the same amount of state formula funding. However, if that supplemental or additional funding is allocated by the legislature or approved by the legislature, that would mean every consortium gets some additional funding from that, some chunk of that 10 million, according to that consortium's percentage of statewide funding that they receive of the statewide total. So that would just mean if we have that additional funding. I also see that in the chat, we have a question about federal funding remaining the same. So that would mean that the hours used to calculate federal funding would remain the same as well. So, but we also know year by year, there's little things that also affect the federal funding. So, and one of those things is how much is allocated. The feds are giving us a 1% increase in federal funding. So that, you know, that could mean that programs get the same amount, or it could mean that programs get a slight 1% increase. But again, we also have to figure out some of the other components of that formula, like how much is needed for distance learning platforms or other things that we use federal funding for. So the federal funding is likely to be similar to last year. The hours used will be the same, but what that means in terms of the exact contact hour rate is not yet known.
Thanks, Brad, for that additional clarification. So again, I would invite you to type in the chat if you're willing to share, raise your hand, unmute yourself. We're curious to hear a little more about the discussions that happened in your breakout groups and the models that you are all considering. In the group that I was in, there was quite a variety, ranging from plans to have all teachers teaching face-to-face while having options for students to join via Zoom, those face-to-face classes, to designating one distance learning teacher, to considering how staffing might be split to offer some in-person and some distance education. So what was discussed in your group? Any models that you talked about or heard about that were exciting to you? What are you thinking about? What did you hear from your colleagues?
Well, if we don't have any volunteers, I might volunteer someone from the group that I was in. We had a lot of discussion about what Southeast ABE, what Penny was doing, and Albert Lee. Penny, would you like to share about how you have a class where some of the students in that class are in person and some are online, and how the teacher has kind of arranged the camera and works, and how the teacher makes that work.
Hi, yes. Can you hear me?
Yep.
So yeah, so in Albert Lee, we've been in person all year except for Thanksgiving till after Christmas. And what we have found is we have found students that really want to be in person and some people who really didn't want to come in the building. So my upper ESL teacher and GED teacher has 9, well, we know adult basic ed. On any given day, she could have 9 people sitting in front of her in her classroom and 9 people sitting at home. And it's worked very well. She was a little nervous on how the class would interact, but they've actually interacted very well. It's been very successful. And so we are definitely gonna continue to do that next year. It's wonderful, especially for our working students. 5 minutes before class, they can boot up their computer and get on. And so she logs everyone in on a Chromebook, and then she uses her other computer in her classroom. So the students are either looking at the teacher, or if she's doing a lesson on the Chromebook, they can see on the smart board, they can see the smart board. So yeah, no, it's worked very well. She was just like everyone else with COVID. She was last year, she's like, how are we ever gonna do this? And this year she is saying, I can't imagine not doing this. And just so you know, this teacher is 68 years old and is only gonna be here 1 more year. So don't think you can't try new things, because she's doing it.
I appreciate that, Penny. Thank you for sharing that.
That's exciting. Thank you for sharing, Penny. And I think it really exemplifies the attitude that staff have taken this year, and just really jumping in and trying new things and making it work. I'd love to hear from at least a couple more people, different models that you're planning on or considering.
This is Karen from Mankato. Right before we disconnected out of our breakout rooms, Patty was talking a little bit about collaborating with her area learning center, because they are anticipating that there might be people who don't make it in high school this year and need to switch to GED. And considering how can they provide GED and something more this late summer or fall to get people re-engaged and move them forward. Patty, I don't know if you have any more thoughts to share on that, or if it's just an idea that you're talking about, but I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about that if you're willing. It almost sounded a little bit like a GED plus model.
Patty, if you're talking, we're not hearing you. Looks like Patty maybe is trying to unmute. Maybe you could chat to us, Patty, and let us know if you're trying to speak. Oh, she said she's having problems with her mic. Oh no.
You know, in Mankato, we are anticipating more GED students in the fall. Our district has asked us not to stop GED. Typically we do in August, we take that month off, but they've asked us to continue GED programming straight through, just in case students bail out of summer school or give up at the end and need to switch to GED. They want it available and ready for the people who need it in August.
That's interesting. Thanks, Karen.
This is Lori. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Lori.
So one thing someone in our group said, he's from Winona and he's looking for a GED teacher, but he did say, if I can't find someone who's in our area, and can meet individually with students, it's great if there's an online option so he could find someone maybe from a different part of Minnesota who's comfortable working with GED students online and helping to prepare them. So I think that's just a wonderful, it opens some possibilities for staffing from different parts of the state if that's going to be workable and funded. That was a good idea, I thought.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. That's actually the first time I've heard that idea shared. And I think given some of the challenges that different programs have had in hiring and finding qualified staff, that could be a new option for programs.
Or even in something like this, if it's going to be a really busy summer, related to what Karen was saying, you know, people really trying to get their GED before colleges start in the fall.
Absolutely.
It looked like at one point that Laura Malott was going to share. Laura?
Oh, I was just saying that most of our people in our group were just saying that we're just going to continue on and do what's best for the students and staff. The needs are different and it keeps changing. So we're just going to focus on right now and then just see how it goes for the summer. Once again, check with students and staff, make changes as needed and continue on.
Yeah, that makes sense. And taking it slowly and slowly adjusting based on student need and student reaction. That does make sense.
I'm wondering from my group, this is Anne, if I thought it was interesting, Jason Sellers from Burnsville shared about being able to survey their students about what they were comfortable with. I don't know if Jason, you'd be willing to share that. That's kind of hard to get widespread responses to surveys like that from our students. Jason? No? I guess I could read it. What I recorded in the document was that they were able to survey their students about what they wanted this spring, and 60% were most comfortable and felt the safest online still. And then about 25% wanted 1 day a week, and the rest online, which is one of the models I think that they've been doing. So I think that he shared with us that that's something that they're looking at perhaps for the fall too.
Thanks, Anne. We have a question from Elizabeth in the chat. Have any programs started developing agreements for sharing student hours across consortia? Say I teach an online GED social studies class, and a teacher from another consortia teaches an online GED science class for the same group of learners. That's been one of the discussions you've been having with colleagues. Please chime in, type in the chat. Jill says she's very interested in that as well. Karen, do you want to just really briefly share how you're doing that with your regional transitions funded classes?
Yeah, we do have a memorandum of understanding for our region that when we serve a regional class, how those hours get split and who gets what. I can share that MOU. I'll dig for it and try to put it in the chat. We've also indicated in there, I think we've indicated in there, if we want to offer a class regionally to other consortia, that students could just co-enroll between the two consortia, and whoever's paying the teacher would claim those hours. So for example, with your one consortium is offering the GED social studies and another consortium is offering the GED science, what you essentially could do is just the person who's in consortia A that's offering social and they want to go take the science class at Consortium B, they could co-enroll in Consortium B, so they're actually enrolled in both consortium. And then the consortia that's offering the social studies claims that student for their social studies class, and this consortium that's offering the science claims the hours for the science class. Because students can be enrolled in 2 different consortium at the same time. You just have to talk to each other and make sure you share test scores so that person isn't testing over and over.
Thanks, Karen. That's really helpful. Well, we're coming close to the end of our time here. So Carla is going to share a little bit about how we can continue this conversation through our new Mighty Networks networking group.
Sure. All right. Thanks, Astrid. For the past several years, we have been using the Schoology platform as a platform for online courses and networking and discussion groups. And it has worked well, but recently we found out it has not been a free account for teachers. And so a small group of folks from the statewide PD committee looked for a new networking platform. And what we found is something called the Mighty Networks. And there's a link to the Mighty Networks on this slide. And that will kind of tell you, I think if someone could pop that into the chat, that is a place where you can go and find out information about the Mighty Networks, but it's a place where you can post and have threaded conversations. You can direct message and chat. You can search topics, participate in groups organized around various content areas. Currently, we have a few groups set up, and of interest to you would be the administrator and manager group. So maybe, Brad, if we could actually go to the site and take a look. This is what the site looks like. And so you will start with the welcome, and then that will walk you through what the site is, what is available to you on the site, how to get started, how to set up your profile, how to set up how you get notified, how to make posts, answer questions, and that type of thing. So maybe if we go over and take a look at the current groups that are set up. Currently, there you can see it's the admin manager group, which I host. So basically I just, your request to join that group comes to me and I okay it, and then you're in the group. We also have adult career pathways, corrections, English language arts, math and numeracy, standard adult high school diploma, one-room schoolhouse groups that you can join. Maybe if we take a look at the administrator manager group, yeah. And underneath that we have, there's a little welcome, and then there are topics. And I think if you go over to the topics, there we go. Yep. So these are some of the topics that we have covered in the recent manager meetup conversations that we've had. So the big one that we've been doing recently is the program planning and budgeting. So why don't you click on that one? And then there you can see there are questions, the questions that we've just been discussing now. You can go continue the conversation there. It might be a really great place to continue if you started a conversation with your group, if you want to continue and post things there. Let's go back to the topics. Yep, and communicating remotely. We had a manager meetup about that. We also had a manager meetup about learning models, face-to-face, hybrid, and in person. So it's a great place where you can just focus your discussion around various topics. And if we go back to our slides for this session, there at the bottom, there's learn more and join the network. And I believe the link has been put into the chat, and that's where you can get the link to join. I think that's it. Any questions about that?
Thank you so much, Carla. And we really do hope this is a robust conversation. And thank you, Carla, for getting this set up. And hopefully this will be a great place for you as administrators to really share with each other, share ideas, share questions, kind of pose ideas and resources, maybe share resources with one another. That will make all of our work easier. And as you know, in adult education, we're always sharing. There's been many jokes about how we do that. But really, our collaborative nature in adult education is so important. And so it's great to have this platform to continue that process. So we want to remind you that there are materials, those will be available at the Literacy Action Network website, especially the recording and the slides as a PDF. Our next web chat will be on Wednesday, May 5th from 1 to 2:30. As Jody noted, that will be a session especially focusing on the grant application workshop and grant application materials for the annual grant. There is a link to register there on the slide, but Astrid, thank you, has also put the link to register for the May web chat in the chat. Thank you all so much for all of your great ideas today and for collaborating and helping each other out. I mean, in our conversation group, people were talking about setting up site visits with each other. So that's outstanding. And that's really what's so important, is allowing each of you to share with one another. We do hope, though, that you fill out the evaluation after the webinar. Thanks again to Astrid for putting the link to the webinar evaluation in the chat. And so please take some time. It's a pretty simple evaluation with just a couple questions. Should only take you a couple of minutes to fill that out, but that will really help us as Literacy Action Network plans additional manager meetups, as Minnesota Department of Education plans additional web chats, and as we all plan additional professional development. Your feedback is so important to that process. So at this point then, I think we can open it up for any additional questions folks may have. To raise your question, please feel free to unmute yourself and share, or you can also enter the question in the chat. I think at this point, we can also stop the recording.